I was carrying a warm apple cobbler in my hands when I heard it. Why is she even still alive? The laugh that followed wasn't loud, but it split me open in ways no storm ever could. I froze behind the wooden gate, heart pounding, breath caught in my chest. In that single moment, decades of sacrifice, every meal cooked, every bill paid, every bedtime story was erased with one cruel whisper. And yet I walked in anyway. Past the string lights, past the laughter, past faces that looked through me as though I had already disappeared. This is not just the story of a grandmother betrayed. This is the story of what happens when silence breaks and dignity rises. Before we begin, I invite you to subscribe so you won't miss the good story that might brighten your new day. The story doesn't start with laughter, introductions, or warmth. It begins with a wound. The August evening air was heavy with the mingled smells of grilled meat and citronella candles. Somewhere in the corner of the yard, a Bluetooth speaker pulsed with a song too fast, too loud, the kind of beat that belonged to people under 40. String lights zigzagged across the backyard, glowing like tired stars, throwing shadows on paper plates and sweating bottles of beer. At the gate stood Celeste Hartman, 72 years old, clutching a glass dish of apple cobbler that was still warm from the oven. The heat pressed into her palms, grounding her as if she needed proof she was still here, still real. For one fragile moment, she let herself imagine. She pictured Daniel, her only son, looking up and catching sight of her. She saw his face light up the way it had when he was 8 years old, grinning gap-toothed, proud to shout, "That's my mom." She imagined her grandchildren rushing toward her, asking about the gummy worms she used to sneak into their pockets. But the vision shattered before it could even settle. From the other side of the fence came a voice, sharp, low, coded in mockery. Why is she even still alive? The words weren't shouted, they weren't meant for microphones or headlines. They were whispered, a cruel aside tucked between sips of wine, but Celeste heard them as clearly as if they'd been carved into the wood. A cousin chuckled in response, a short, brittle laugh that sliced through the evening like broken glass. Her daughter-in-law, Jody, the same woman who once thanked her for babysitting, who once smiled tightly at Christmas dinner. The voice was unmistakable. Celeste's chest tightened, but her hands did not tremble, not yet. She steadied herself, pressed the warm cobbler tighter against her ribs, and pushed the gate open. The scene inside the yard unfolded like a theater where she was no longer part of the cast. Laughter swelled and then dipped. Faces turned toward one another, never toward her. No one paused, no one waved. She crossed the yard silently, her shoes crunching on the gravel path, and placed the cobbler on the far edge of the picnic table. The glass dish landed with a soft thud, but even that sound was swallowed by the noise of everyone else. No one thanked her. No one reached for a plate. Daniel stood tall in the center of it all, a beer raised in his hand, his voice ringing out to family. Cheers erupted, glasses clinked, but not a single eye glanced toward the woman who had sacrificed everything for him decades ago. Celeste found a chair at the far end of the folding table. Her back ached, but she sat tall, spine straight, as though posture alone could carry her dignity. Children, her own grandchildren, darted past, laughing, faces sticky from popsicles. None of them stopped to say hello, none even looked her way. It felt like being erased in real time. Eventually Jody approached, her smile pulled too tight, the kind of smile worn when cameras are around but compassion is not. "Oh, Celeste," she said lightly, "we didn't know you were coming." The same voice that had wished her gone. "I brought cobbler," Celeste replied softly, her voice steady though her throat ached. "Did you want a plate?" Jody asked, already turning her body away. "I'm fine," and that was that. The evening dragged on. Celeste stayed not to beg for inclusion, but to watch, to remember, to absorb every slight carved into her heart like etchings on stone. When the food was eaten, she gathered plates no one asked her to touch. She folded napkins, wiped sticky tables, stacked plastic cups, moving with the quiet precision of someone who knew what it meant to serve but not to belong. By the time the string lights dimmed and people drifted inside, The cobbler sat untouched at the edge of the table, as invisible as the woman who had carried it here. Celeste picked it up, pressed the cooled glass dish against her chest again, and walked out through the same gate she had entered. She did not storm away, she did not cry. She left with calm steps, her decision coiling inside her like something sharp, something alive. At home, the kitchen light buzzed softly as she set the dish on the counter. She sliced a square for herself, ate it standing at the sink, the cinnamon and butter sweet but heavy like nostalgia she wasn't sure she wanted to keep. The cobbler had never tasted more bitter. The camera of her life, if anyone had been watching, would have lingered on her face, lined, weary, but not broken. Betrayal had not destroyed her, it had awakened her. That night, after washing the empty dish and placing it carefully in the rack, Celeste sat at her kitchen table in silence. No music, no television, just the steady hum of the refrigerator and the faint echo of Jody's words clawing at her ears. Why is she even still alive? Her lips pressed into a thin line. She whispered to no one, because I haven't finished yet. The scene holds there, the cobbler dish drying in the rack, the shadows stretching across her kitchen wall, before the camera slowly pans to the filing cabinet in the corner of the room. The one filled with every document of her life. And when morning sunlight slips through the blinds, it finds Celeste sitting at the table again, her hand resting on a folder labeled in fading ink, Daniel House. The story has only just begun. Morning light bled through the blinds, catching on the edges of dust motes that drifted lazily in Celeste's kitchen. She sat at the same table where Daniel once did his math homework, his legs too long for the chair, his pencil tapping impatiently while she urged him to slow down to double-check his answers. Back then he needed her. Now he barely tolerated her. Her fingers hovered over the old filing cabinet in the corner, the beige paint chipped, the handle cool beneath her touch. She hadn't opened it in years. But last night's wound demanded it. With a slow tug, the drawer rattled open. Folders leaned against one another, labeled in her careful, slanted handwriting, insurance, utilities, birth certificates. And then near the back, one word written in ink that had long since faded, Daniel House. Her heart thumped once heavy before she pulled it free. The folder was thick, stuffed with copies, contracts, receipts. She spread them out across the kitchen table like tarot cards predicting a future she no longer wanted. There it was in black and white, the purchase agreement for the house Daniel now lived in, the one where she had been erased like an unwanted guest. Her name was absent. His name and Jody's gleamed in bold print, and then the letter. A single page in her own hand, written years ago with optimism that now mocked her. Because you're my son, no repayment needed, just a start so you and Jody can build a life. She pressed her palm to the page, felt the indentations of her own handwriting, as if the paper carried the weight of her former hope. The words cut deeper than Jody's whisper had. Betrayal from a daughter-in-law was one thing, betrayal from her own son, wrapped in indifference, was another. For a long while she sat there, the silence heavy. The refrigerator hummed, a bird outside trilled once then flew away. At last she reached for the phone. Her hands were steady now. She dialed a number she hadn't used in years. After 2 rings, a crisp voice answered. Marion Lowell. Marion, it's Celeste Hartman from Bridge Club. I have some questions about property and wills and gifts. The voice on the other end didn't falter. Come by tomorrow, bring everything, we'll sort it out. That was all, no judgment, no pity, just instructions. It was exactly what Celeste needed. That night, she ironed her slacks and laid them neatly over the chair. She polished her shoes. She chose her good coat, even though the forecast promised warm weather. Because when you're about to change the shape of your life, you wear something with buttons. For the first time in months, she slept without the crutch of sleeping pills. Not in peace, not yet, but in alignment. The next morning, the air carried the faint tang of cut grass as she drove across town to Marion's house. The front porch smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and peppermint tea. Inside, the woman herself looked older but sharper than Celeste remembered. Silver hair pinned neatly, glasses perched at the edge of her nose, a desk stacked with orderly piles of files. "Let's see what we've got," Marion said, pulling the folder toward her. She flipped through the documents with brisk efficiency, her fingers tapping lightly on each page. No shared title, no written expectations. It's theirs now, you gifted it. "I know," Celeste said softly. "But," Marion continued, looking up over the rim of her glasses, "that doesn't mean you're powerless. What else do you hold? Accounts? Insurance?" "Oh, Will," Celeste nodded. "All of it. Then you still have choices." The word struck like a key turning in a long-locked door. Choices. For so long, Celeste had believed she was trapped, her future shrinking to whatever scraps her son and his wife decided to toss her way. Now she realized she had more than scraps. She had pen and paper, she had law, she had herself. Marion leaned back, crossed her arms. "You can't take the house back, that ship sailed. But you can make sure they don't get anything else. Not unless you want them to." Celeste inhaled, slow and deliberate. It wasn't revenge she felt stirring in her chest, it was repair. "What do I need to do?" she asked. Marion slid a single sheet of paper across the desk, neatly typed with bullet points. A checklist: revocation of medical power of attorney, revision of will, establishment of living trust, transfer of accounts, password protections. "Start here," Marion said. And Celeste, "Don't wait. People who hesitate usually end up regretting it." Celeste folded the paper carefully, placed it in her purse, and stood. She felt taller, steadier, as though her spine had been reinforced with steel rods. On the drive home, she didn't turn on the radio. She let the silence fill the car, heavy but not suffocating, like a coat she chose to wear. At her kitchen table that evening, she spread the checklist in front of her. She pulled a blank sheet of paper and wrote a single word at the top: Daniel. Then, with deliberate calm, she drew one straight line through it. The ink looked darker than it should have, as if it had been waiting all along for her to choose herself. She set down the pen, she exhaled, and for the first time in a very long time, Celeste smiled, not because she was happy, but because she was ready. The following week became a series of quiet revolutions, not explosions, not confrontations, just small, deliberate acts that shifted the ground beneath Celeste's life. On Monday morning, she stood at the counter of First National Bank, her good coat buttoned, her checklist folded neatly in her purse. The young banker, barely older than her grandson, clicked through screens on his computer. "You'd like to update your accounts, Mrs. Hartman." "I'd like to remove my son from every single one," she said calmly. His fingers hovered, unsure. "Completely." "Yes, completely. Reissue new cards, change the logins, add no one else but me." Her voice didn't rise, didn't crack. It was even, steady, the way a judge might read a verdict. By the time she left the branch, a fresh stack of documents sat in her purse, stamped and notarized. Her accounts were hers again, locked tight. That afternoon, she called her doctor's office. "I need to revoke my medical power of attorney," she told the receptionist. "My son's name is on the old one, it needs to come off." The receptionist hesitated. "Do you have someone else to appoint?" "I'll find someone," Celeste said, "but not him, not anymore." She hung up, her pulse slow, steady. Every phone call, every signature, every checkbox filled in was a brick laid in the fortress she was quietly building. At home, she began tending to the smaller symbols, things that looked ordinary but held weight. She replaced the old porch light bulb that had burned out last winter. It wasn't just light, it was proof she didn't have to wait for Daniel to fix anything. She pulled out her address book from the drawer. The plastic dividers had yellowed with age. She flipped to see Carlson's, Daniel's, Hart's, and there in neat ink, Daniel and Jody. She drew a single black line through the names. Then she flipped to L and carefully wrote a new one: Marion Lowell, attorney. One name out, one name in. She opened her hallway closet and pulled down the shoebox where she kept, just in case, gifts for her grandchildren, stickers, little notebooks, candy. For years she'd stocked it faithfully, always ready to surprise them with something sweet. That night she emptied it into a paper bag and set it on the curb with the recycling. She watched it sit there for hours untouched. Just like her, On Wednesday, she sat across from Marian again, this time in the lawyer's downtown office. The blinds were drawn against the afternoon sun, the air smelling faintly of printer ink and lemon polish. "We'll establish the living trust today," Marian said, shuffling papers into a neat stack. "You'll be both trustee and beneficiary for now. Later you decide where it goes." "I already know," Celeste said. "When I die, I want the house sold. The proceeds should go to the Greenway Women's Shelter." Marian looked up, surprised. "The shelter on Greenway Avenue?" "Yes, I stayed there once, a long time ago, before Daniel was born." For a moment, silence filled the room, softer than pity, heavier than sympathy. Marian simply nodded. "Then that's where it will go." A pen met paper, signature after signature. Celeste signed with deliberate strokes, her hand steady, her name reclaiming its weight. That evening, back at her kitchen table, she wrote in her journal, not long entries, just fragments, single sentences that read like declaration. "I am not erasing them, I am choosing me. Silence is no longer service. Silence is survival undone. Power can be quiet and still be power." She closed the journal, tucked it into the drawer, and brewed herself a pot of chamomile tea. The fortress was not finished yet, but the walls were rising brick by brick, signature by signature. 2 nights later, she received a voicemail from Daniel. His voice was clipped, uneasy. "Mom, Jody says you've been acting strange. I don't know what's going on with all this legal stuff, but call me back, okay, please." She listened to it once, then she pressed delete. No archive, no replay, no shrine to excuses. The fortress was built not only of papers and passwords, but of boundaries. And the walls, once invisible, now stood firm. Saturday morning, Celeste pulled the curtains wide and let the sunlight pour into the living room. She carried the old family photo albums to the table. One by one, she flipped through them. Birthdays, vacations, weddings, all moments captured in glossy stills. Some she kept, others she slid into a separate folder labeled history. That folder went into a drawer away from everything else. The family she had once imagined was gone. The family that remained in photographs was history. The life she was building now was present. As she closed the last album, she glanced at the clock. It was nearly noon, time to bake again. She tied on her apron, measured flour and sugar with her heavy silver measuring cups, the ones Frank had bought her on their 10th anniversary. She made a pie, blueberry with lemon zest. But this one wasn't for a gathering, not for Daniel, not for anyone else's approval. It was just for her. She pulled it from the oven, golden and fragrant, and set it on the windowsill to cool. She wrapped herself in the old afghan her sister had given her, sat on the porch, and breathed in the smell of warm fruit and sugar. The fortress was rising, not with stone, not with mortar, but with choices, boundaries, and the simple act of claiming her own table. The first sign came as a vibration in her purse, a text message. Celeste was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping chamomile tea from the chipped blue cup she'd had since Frank was alive. The phone buzzed once, twice. She picked it up, slid on her glasses, and read. "Daniel, Mom, Jody didn't mean it. Don't be dramatic. She was just tired that night. We're all tired. Let's not make a big deal." Celeste stared at the words until they blurred. "Don't be dramatic." That was always his phrase when she had tried to speak up, at birthdays, at Christmas dinners, at moments when the silence became too heavy for her to carry alone. She pressed her thumb against the screen. Delete, no reply, no archived folder of excuses, no digital museum for apologies that never mattered, just gone. The phone buzzed again 20 minutes later, a voicemail this time. She didn't answer. When the machine picked up, Daniel's voice filled the kitchen. "Mom, please call me back. I don't know why you're doing this. Jody's upset. The kids are asking questions. Just call me, okay?" She listened once, then hit delete again. The silence afterward felt cleaner. That evening there was a knock at the door. For a heartbeat her chest clenched. She thought maybe it was Daniel coming to push, to demand, to pry. But when she opened it, she found Clara, her neighbor from next door, holding a plastic container of lentil soup. "Made too much again," Clara said with a shrug, her gray hair pinned back, cheeks flushed from cooking. Thought I'd bring you some, and have you seen my cat? He hasn't come home since yesterday. Celeste smiled faintly. No, but I'll keep an eye out. Clara stepped inside, the soup steaming between them. Celeste didn't explain anything about Daniel or Jody or the cobbler that had gone untouched. Clara didn't ask. Instead, they sat at the kitchen table, splitting a blueberry pie Celeste had baked just for herself. Clara took one bite and sighed so dramatically it made Celeste laugh. "Oh, this pie is dangerous," Clara said, "so good it makes my knees hum." The two women laughed together, their voices filling the space where silence had lived for too long. For the first time in weeks, Celeste felt lighter. When Clara left, Celeste lingered at the table. Her eyes fell on the hallway shelf. On the framed photograph of Daniel at 8 years old. He was missing a front tooth, his grin wide and innocent, as if she were his entire world. She picked it up, held it in her lap, her thumb brushing the glass. "I miss you," she whispered. "Not the man, the boy." Then she turned the photo face down. Days passed. Celeste's life now had a rhythm: morning coffee in her smallest pot, afternoons spent combing through files and crossing items off Marion's checklist, evenings filled with baking not for others but for herself. But even fortresses draw attention when they rise. On Thursday, while she clipped the marigolds in her small garden, the phone rang again. She let it go to voicemail. "Mom, it's Daniel. Look, I don't understand what you're doing. You're making everything so complicated. I can't believe you're cutting me out of paperwork. It's Mom, this is family we're talking about. Call me." The message ended. She didn't move. The shears in her hand glinted in the sun. She clipped another flower stem, let the petals fall onto the dirt. Her fortress was standing, and now the knocking on its walls had begun. On Sunday morning, she walked to the curb with a paper bag filled with what had once been treasures for her grandchildren: stickers, little notebooks, toy cars. She set the bag down with the recycling, then stood watching as the sun rose higher. The bag sat there for hours untouched, just like her. Later that afternoon, she received another message, this one from Jody. "Celeste, I don't know what Marion's filling your head with, but this has gone too far. Daniel's worried sick. The kids are confused. Whatever you're trying to prove, it's not fair. We're your family." Celeste closed her eyes, listening to the voice echo in her head. "We're your family, but family doesn't laugh when someone asks why you're still alive." She deleted the message. That evening there was another knock. For one foolish second, Celeste's heart jumped again. But it was Clara once more. This time with no soup, just herself. "Mind if I sit?" Clara asked. Celeste nodded. They sat at the kitchen table, sipping tea. Clara didn't bring up Daniel or Jody. She talked about crossword puzzles and the stray cat she'd started calling Vernon. Celeste found herself laughing again, the sound unfamiliar but welcome. When Clara left, Celeste walked down the hallway, her slippers brushing against the hardwood. She paused by the shelf, where the photograph of young Daniel now lay face down. She didn't pick it up. She didn't cry. Instead, she opened the desk drawer and pulled out the envelope labeled legal. Inside, her will, her directives, her power of attorney. She set them on the table and stared at them for a long time. Tomorrow, she would bring them back to Marion. Tomorrow, she would take the next step. Tonight, she whispered to herself, "I'm not erasing them, I'm choosing me." By the end of the week, Celeste could feel the pressure shifting. The fortress she'd built, quiet, legal, unshakable, was no longer hidden. The messages had stopped being uncertain. They had sharpened into something else: urgency, irritation, fear. She knew it was only a matter of time before one of them appeared in person. It happened on a Wednesday morning, 10:42 sharp. The knock was not tentative, not neighborly, not Clara's half-apology tap. It was firm, deliberate, the kind of knock that expected doors to open. When Celeste pulled it back, Jody stood there. Her daughter-in-law wore heels too high for the damp weather and a coat the color of wet bone. Her lipstick was flawless, her hair sculpted into place, but her eyes were tight, coiled with something unspoken. "Mabel," she said, like she was reading the word from a script. She had never once called her mom. Jody didn't wait to be invited in. She stepped across the threshold as if the narrative of the family still belonged to her. Celeste closed the door quietly behind her, not with anger but with deliberation. Jody planted herself in the center of the living room, her hands clasped too tightly around the straps of her purse. She looked around, eyes darting to the packed boxes near the wall. "This is getting out of hand," she began, her voice pitched with authority. "You've blocked Daniel's number, you've changed your accounts. Ruby is sneaking around to call you, and now I hear you're moving." "All true," Celeste said calmly. The reply knocked Jody off script. She blinked just once. "We're your family, you can't just erase us because of a bad day." Celeste tilted her head, studying her as though Jody were a curious exhibit. "It wasn't one day," she said softly. "It was years, years of polite dismissal, lukewarm invitations, being tolerated instead of welcomed. That night only pulled the curtain back." Jody's jaw tightened. "We never asked you for anything. That's the problem. You never asked, you only expected." A flush of color rose to Jody's cheeks. "I don't know what Daniel ever did to deserve this. He's a good man, he works hard, he's a father." Celeste's voice stayed even but sharper now. "Good men don't laugh when someone wonders why their mother is still alive." Jody stepped forward, her heels clicking against the hardwood. "You think you're punishing him, you're punishing Ruby. She's confused, she's hurt, and you're using her to prove some kind of point." The accusation hung heavy. Guilt was a familiar weight in Celeste's life, but this time she breathed through it. "Ruby came to me alone," she said. "She knows what a closed door feels like. She doesn't need me to teach her." Jody scoffed, pacing now, her coat swaying like a curtain in a storm. "You've always made things dramatic." "No," Celeste said, her voice rising for the first time, still controlled but edged with steel. "I've always made things possible. The down payment on your house, the babysitting, the casserole, the last-minute rides, the birthdays where I was seated behind the centerpieces so I wouldn't ruin the photograph. That was me making things possible, and you've mistaken it for weakness." Jody spun, her eyes catching on the binder that lay neatly on the coffee table. She frowned, recognizing authority when she saw it. "What is this?" Celeste picked it up, placed it squarely between them. "My trust documents, my will, my decisions. You should read them, though you won't find your name inside." The silence that followed was thick, heavy as cement. Jody's eyes flicked from the binder to Celeste, searching for cracks, for a hint of hesitation. There was none. "You're really doing this," Jody whispered. "I am." "And what happens when you're alone in that little apartment?" Jody demanded, her voice climbing. "When no one checks on you, when Ruby forgets to call, you think that binder will keep you warm." Celeste didn't flinch. She placed a hand lightly on the binder as though steadying it. "Then I'll still have myself, and I'd rather be alone with honesty than surrounded by people who flinch at my presence." The words landed like a gavel strike. Jody's lips pressed into a line so tight it nearly disappeared. She turned, pacing toward the door. "You're throwing everything away." "No," Celeste said, her tone softening, almost tender. "I'm finally choosing what to keep." Jody froze, her hand on the doorknob. For a moment, her composure cracked, and Celeste saw the raw edge of fear behind the perfect hair and the polished coat. But just as quickly, Jody recovered. "Don't expect us to come running when you change your mind." "I'm not running," Celeste said, "and I won't." The door shut behind her, not slammed but punctuated, a period at the end of a long sentence. The house was quiet again. Celeste placed the binder back on the table, her hands steady. She did not feel triumphant. She did not feel vindicated. She felt certain. Later that evening, as twilight pooled in the corners of the room, her phone buzzed with a single message. "Ruby," she came home fuming. "You okay?" Celeste typed back slowly. "Perfectly. Some doors need closing, Ruby. That doesn't mean you're on the other side." A heart emoji appeared seconds later, followed by "Still bringing cookies Thursday. Don't bail." Celeste smiled. She wouldn't. The rain had been falling all afternoon, steady and gray, a curtain that softened the edges of everything. Celeste sat at the kitchen table with a pot of chamomile cooling beside her. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon, the remnants of the spice cake she'd baked the day before. At 4:12 p.m., the knock came. It wasn't firm like Jody's, not the entitled hammering of someone who assumed the door was theirs to open. This knock was hesitant. 3 taps, then silence, a pause. Then a fourth, lighter, almost apologetic. Celeste's chest tightened. She rose slowly, her slippers whispering against the floor. When she opened the door, there stood Ruby, 16 years old, drowning in an oversized hoodie with the school's mascot peeling across the front. Her sneakers were soaked, laces dragging like tired tails. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. "I wasn't sure you'd open," Ruby said finally, her voice smaller than Celeste remembered. "I wasn't sure you'd knock," Celeste replied. The girl's lips twitched, not quite a smile, more like a crack in a wall. "Can I come in, just me?" Celeste stepped aside. Ruby slipped past, dripping rainwater onto the rug. She sat at the kitchen table like she belonged there but wasn't certain anymore. Her eyes roamed the room, catching on the familiar, the blue china cup, the faded curtains, and something in her shoulders eased. Celeste poured tea. Placed a slice of banana bread on a plate. Ruby picked at the bread, crumbling the edges between her fingers before finally speaking. "Mom says you've gone crazy," she whispered. "That you're cutting us out, that you're punishing everyone." Celeste didn't rush to defend herself. She stirred her tea, watching the swirl of honey dissolve. "I'm not cutting, I'm choosing, there's a difference." Ruby's eyes dropped to her lap. "I don't hate you." Her voice cracked. I think I copied how they acted. At the library I saw you and I looked away. At the grocery store, at the party, I wanted to belong. So I did what they did." The words folded something inside Celeste she hadn't realized was still open. The instinct to comfort rose like muscle memory, but she kept it contained. She had spent a lifetime shielding others from their shame. This time she let Ruby sit in it. After a long silence, she asked gently, "What are you sorry for?" Ruby blinked hard, eyes wet. "For pretending you weren't there, for laughing when Mom said what she said. It wasn't funny. It was cruel." Celeste's throat ached, but her voice stayed steady. "Thank you for saying that." Ruby's fingers twisted in the sleeve of her hoodie. "Can I come back, not to live or anything, just to see you, just me?" Celeste studied her, this girl who had the same eyes Daniel once had at 8 years old, bright, unguarded, before the world taught him to be unkind. She nodded slowly. "You can come back, but not for pie, not for gifts, only for truth." "I can do that." The words were simple, but they carried weight. They sat for an hour, not talking about Daniel or Jody, not unpacking the wounds that weren't ready to heal. Instead, they talked about school projects, about a boy in Ruby's class who had drawn a beard on his mask and been sent to the principal's office, about a stray cat that had started following her home. When Ruby left, Celeste wrapped a second slice of banana bread in foil. She handed it to her granddaughter without ceremony. Ruby smiled for real this time, small, crooked, but true. Celeste watched from the porch as the girl walked down the driveway, her sneakers splashing in shallow puddles, until she turned the corner and disappeared. Inside, the silence felt different, not heavy, honest. That night, Celeste opened her journal. Her handwriting was deliberate, steady. Maybe some doors don't need to be slammed, just gently locked from the inside, with a window left cracked for the ones who come alone and knock with care. 2 days later, she clipped an apartment listing from the Sunday paper. A small 1-bedroom on the edge of town. South-facing windows, washer and dryer included. Just enough. She pinned the ad to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a sunflower. On Tuesday, she visited. Brick buildings, tidy flower beds, a bench under a linden tree. The manager, Teresa, smiled warmly as she unlocked the door to Unit 1B. "It's quiet here," Teresa said. "Mostly retirees and teachers. South-facing windows, heats included. Do you allow cats?" "We do." Celeste smiled faintly. "I don't have one, but I like knowing I could." The space was small, yes, but honest. No ghosts of laughter that had cut her, no shadows of photographs where she'd been cropped out. Just walls waiting for new stories. She ran her hand over the laminate countertop. It wasn't marble, but it was hers. "I'll take it," she said. Teresa blinked. "You don't want to think about it." "I already have. By that evening, the paperwork was signed, the deposit paid, move-in set for the first of the month. Back at her old house, Celeste sat among half-packed boxes. The kitchen table was stripped bare except for a lamp, a teacup, and her journal. She opened it once more and wrote a single line. Some doors close with finality, some open with courage. Today I chose both. She set down the pen, exhaled slowly, and for the first time in decades, felt like her life was hers again. The morning of the move arrived quietly without ceremony. Celeste woke before dawn not to an alarm but to the soft insistence of memory. She brewed coffee in her chipped blue mug, the same mug she had used for more than 20 years, and stood barefoot in the kitchen. The linoleum was cool under her soles, the house still and dark. She didn't need the light. She knew every inch of this place in the dark, the floorboard that creaked near the hallway, the way the front window whistled if the wind blew from the east. By 9, the movers arrived. 2 young men, polite, efficient, their energy brisk and foreign in the hushed rooms. They were surprised by how few boxes there were. Traveling light, one of them asked with a grin. Celeste nodded. Just what I can carry into the next chapter. She had labeled each box with careful handwriting. Kitchen, keep, donate, bedroom, memories, and one marked do not open yet. The men didn't ask questions. They lifted, stacked, carried. By noon the house stood nearly empty, its bones exposed. Celeste walked slowly through each room, her fingers brushing against walls, counters, doorframes, not clinging, just thanking. In the guest room, she lingered by the dresser she had once offered Daniel and Jody when they first moved in. They'd refused, saying it was too dated. Now it would stay, left for whoever came next. In the hallway, she paused before the framed cross-stitch her sister had given her decades ago. Peace lives here. It had hung so long the paint behind it was brighter than the surrounding wall. She touched it gently, then packed it into her essentials box. In the back bedroom, Daniel's old room, the curtains still bore little sailboats. She sat on the edge of his bed, staring out at the crooked apple tree. It still bloomed every spring, defiant, leaning left but refusing to fall. She remembered the day Daniel had climbed that tree and gotten stuck, wailing until she dragged a ladder out barefoot, furious and laughing all at once. "Don't tell anyone," he had whispered after she got him down. And I never did, she thought now. In the hallway closet, she opened the fireproof box one last time. Inside, birth certificates, insurance papers, the deed. She removed Daniel's birth certificate, not to destroy it, just to separate it. She placed it in a folder marked history and slid it into the drawer of an old desk. At the base of the stairs, she paused. For years, she had kept a small table by the wall with photographs of Daniel's family, school portraits, Christmas snapshots, wedding anniversaries. The frames were gone now, packed away or left behind. Only the faint outlines on the wallpaper remained. She placed a small envelope in the drawer of that empty table. Inside, a single house key and a note. "This house taught me everything, thank you." She didn't sign it. The movers loaded the last box. Celeste stood on the porch, locking the door behind her for the final time. She didn't look back. The apartment smelled of fresh paint when she arrived. The movers carried her boxes in, setting them neatly where she directed. She tipped them more than she should have. She didn't care. Teresa from the leasing office brought a welcome packet and a small plant in a ceramic pot shaped like a cat. "Something green for your windowsill," Teresa said warmly. Celeste smiled. "I think we'll get along." The first thing she unpacked was the kettle. The second was Ruby's sketch, the pencil drawing of the woman at the chessboard. She hung it by the window where the afternoon light caught the lines and made them glow. That evening, she wrapped herself in a blanket and sat on the small balcony with a piece of toast and a book she'd been meaning to read for 15 years. The air was quiet except for the hum of a neighbor's television through the wall. She didn't feel lost. She felt spacious. The next morning, Celeste unpacked the last box. Inside were 2 dresses, a pair of shoes, a tin of buttons she'd collected over decades, and one folded letter yellowed at the edges. Frank's handwriting curved across the page, the letter he'd written before his surgery, the one he hadn't survived. If something goes wrong, don't fold in. Stay open, stay warm, live with your hands unclenched. You have more strength than you know. Celeste placed it in the top drawer of her new desk, next to her will and her medical directives. That afternoon, she baked banana bread in the unfamiliar oven. As it browned, the entire apartment filled with the smell she loved most. She closed her eyes and let it sink into the walls, into the foundation of this new beginning. At 4:00 p.m., Ruby knocked. She carried her school bag and a small jar of fig jam. Thought it sounded like you, Ruby said, smiling shyly. They sat together at the little table, spreading jam thickly over warm bread, crumbs scattering onto napkins. Is this what peace feels like? Ruby asked, licking her fingers. Not all of it, Celeste said softly. But a corner of it, yes. That night, Celeste wrote in her journal, I didn't miss the house. I didn't miss Daniel's silence or Jody's sideways smile. I didn't miss the version of myself that whispered maybe next time they'll see you, because now I see myself, and that's enough. 1 week after the move, Celeste's phone rang. It was Charles, the real estate attorney. It's done, he said. The house sold this morning. The offer came in just above asking. To whom? Celeste asked, though she already knew the answer didn't matter. An older couple, no children. They said they were looking for history and quiet. Celeste almost laughed. They'll find both, she thought. She didn't go back for the walkthrough. She didn't need to. She had already left her note and her gratitude behind. Instead, she met Charles at the bank, signed the last of the closing papers, and walked across the street to the Greenway Women's Shelter. The director, a tired but kind woman named Denise, stared at the check Celeste handed her. Her hands trembled. This is more than we've ever received from a single donor. It's not a gift, Celeste said gently. It's an investment for the women who leave without shoes. Denise's eyes filled with tears. Celeste didn't cry. She'd done her crying long ago. This wasn't grief. This was intention. That night, Celeste made soup. Leeks softened in butter, broth simmered low, the kind of meal that nourished without fanfare. She ate in her robe, standing by the stove, the radio humming with jazz. For the first time in years, she ate not because someone was watching or waiting or judging, but because she was hungry. At 8:30, her buzzer rang. Grandma, it's me. Ruby stood at the door holding a shoebox. Inside were things she didn't want to keep at home. A notebook, a necklace, a charger, a photo of herself and Celeste at the zoo years ago. She set the box on the floor, then sat cross-legged beside it. I don't want to live there when I'm older, she blurted, eyes fixed on her hands. With them, I want something else. Celeste leaned back in her chair, studying the girl. You'll have choices. You get to decide who you become, even if they hate me for it. Ruby nodded slowly, her face brightening with a kind of courage that had been missing before. Do you think people can change? Celeste sipped her tea before answering. Sometimes, but I think the better question is, can they stop pretending? Ruby looked up. Are you still angry? Celeste shook her head. No, I'm finished. Ruby stayed until nearly 10. When she left, she hugged her grandmother tighter than ever before. Celeste closed her eyes, letting herself feel the warmth not as a promise but as a moment. A few days later, a letter arrived. No return address, but the handwriting was Daniel's. Celeste unfolded it slowly. Mom, I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if you want me to. I said things I can't unsay. I let things happen I should have stopped. I don't know how to be the man you deserve, and I'm scared it's too late to learn. But Ruby talks about you every day now. She's different, braver. That came from you. I'm sorry. I hope one day you'll let me try. Celeste folded the letter and placed it in her desk drawer. Not forgiveness, not rejection, just a space where it could rest undisturbed. On her 73rd birthday, Celeste woke without an alarm. No balloons, no surprise brunch, just morning light spilling through clean curtains and the sound of rain against the windows. She made pancakes, 2 of them drizzled with honey and served with sliced pear. She sat in the middle of her small apartment, the photo of Frank propped up on a chair across from her. Well, she whispered, smiling softly. We got here, didn't we? At noon, Ruby arrived with tulips still wrapped in their florist paper. "You're not a birthday cake person," she said shyly, "so I brought flowers like grown-ups do." She handed over a handmade card. On the front, 2 chairs on a porch, one empty, one with a teacup resting on the arm. Inside, "Thanks for keeping a seat for me." Celeste's throat tightened. She placed the card on the windowsill beside Ruby's drawing of the chessboard. They had tea and toast, talking about Ruby's exams, her summer plans to volunteer at the shelter, her dream of starting a support group at school for kids who didn't feel at home in their own houses. "Can I use your name?" Ruby asked. "Only if you use it for something true." Ruby grinned. "That's the only way I use it now." Later that night, Celeste sat on the balcony with her journal. She opened to a fresh page and wrote slowly, carefully. "They once asked why I was still alive. Now I can answer, to remember my name, to set my own table. To leave the door open just wide enough for those who knock with clean hands." She closed the book, exhaled into the soft night air and smiled. Celeste Hartman wasn't erased. She wasn't tolerated. She wasn't waiting anymore. She was alive, and this time she was choosing how. "In the end, I didn't walk away with a perfect family or with every wound healed. What I found was something quieter, something stronger myself. The hurt didn't vanish, but it no longer ruled me. I built my own table, and slowly the right people found their seats there." Maybe that's what survival really means, not waiting for apologies that may never come, but choosing to live with dignity and leaving the door cracked open for love when it's real. And now I want to ask you, what do you believe is harder, forgiving those who hurt you or forgiving yourself for staying too long? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your wisdom. Before you go, if this story touched you and you believe in sharing these values, please subscribe to our channel so you won't miss the next inspiring story. Together, we can grow a community full of strength, healing, and justice.